Let's talk about this idea of saddling our horse. I watched somebody start a colt many years ago, and he was out in the middle of a round pen. He had the colt in his right hand. He had a saddle pad in his right hand. He was carrying the saddle in his left hand. He had everything moving around the pen, helping this horse for the very first saddling. And I saw how he had that saddle hung on his hip. I thought, that is so curious. That's so interesting. And how he set that pad up there, and then he got right up along that colt's shoulder on the right-hand side and swung that saddle up just so smooth. I don't know, like a discus thrower throws a disc, or like a golfer swings his club, or like I set my hat on my head. Just smooth and easy. I don't take my hat up here and crash it down on my head. That's how he set that saddle up. I thought, that's how I want to do it. Can I be that smooth, where it just greased up there and went right on his back, and that offside stirrup came down and laid nicely right on the other side of his body. So I went home and I practiced that. It was awkward at first, and I couldn't quite remember how he held it, but I worked at it and got that figured out. And now this is a great way for you to saddle your horse. Now, if you're a little bit lighter and you don't think you're quite as strong, don't get intimidated, because this is not so much strength as it is technique. If you're getting your saddle somehow up on your horse's back by lifting it up and setting it up there, I bet you can set it up using this technique as well, and it's just a really smooth, handy way to get it done. Now, as you begin to attempt this technique of setting a saddle up like this, if you're concerned that it's going to be a little sloppy and your stirrup is going to hit the other side of your horse, you could tie your stirrup up over the top of your saddle or hang it on the saddle horn to get it out of the way. But you'll find as you get better at this, that won't even be necessary, because you'll set it up there so smoothly that stirrup won't bang them on the other side. Another thing you can do, if you don't want to punish your horse for the first 10 or 15 times trying to throw it up there, just go alongside the fence and just see if you can set it up there on a 4-foot fence or a 5-foot fence and get handy with that, learning that swing, darting down low. If I'm holding my saddle with my left hand on the cantle, my left hand is going to end up right in the middle of my horse's back. Or you're thinking about getting that hand all the way up to the middle of that fence when you set that saddle up there. So sure, practice it on a fence or a tall saddle stand or something like that, and then go out and get old Dobbin out and practice with him. You'll be surprised how handy you'll get. Even a short person, maybe you think you're not very strong, you can still do it, because again, it's more technique than it is strength. Now, you noticed here as I saddled up my horse Whiz that I've done it from the right-hand side, and I will oftentimes saddle my horse from the right-hand side, especially colts for the first time, because if you ever set your saddle up on your horse and then your cinches are wadded up underneath your saddle and you got to go out and straighten them out and get everything organized, by saddling my horse from the right-hand side, my cinches are on the right-hand side. There's no chance of them wadding up underneath my saddle, and I'm also then on the right-hand side to let them down and adjust them, and it alleviates the need for me to have to walk around what is already probably a pretty spooky colt that's not too sure what's happening. So the less passes I have to make from one side to the other, the better off that I'll be. So doing it on the right-hand side is a pretty slick way, and it's a pretty efficient way. After I let those cinches down and know that they're adjusted correctly, we'll go back to the on side or the left side, and we'll begin to cinch them up. Now, this might sound elementary, but you need to keep it in mind when you're saddling your horse. Needless to say, the first cinch that needs to be drawn up is your front cinch. Maybe you have a back cinch, maybe you have a breast collar, but the first cinch that is secured is the front cinch, because that's really the only thing that's holding your saddle on. And when we unsaddle our horses, that needs to be the last thing that is undone. Undo your back cinch, undo your breast collar, and then undo your front cinch, because that's the thing that's securing your saddle to your horse. When I was just a kid, I was helping the old man saddle 25 dude horses every Saturday morning, and he was very particular about how I did up these latigos so that they'd be ready to be pulled nice and even without any twist when we went to saddle these horses up. So at the end of the day, when we would uncinch those horses, we would take that latigo, reach about halfway down, and lift it up and pull it through the D-ring of our saddle to where it laid nice and flat and even. So the next morning it would be ready when we saddled our horse to just take the end of the latigo, stick it right down through the cinch, and give it a pull. No longer having this great big long 6-foot latigo all twisted and hanging over the top of our saddle, but it was very organized and everything was very straight. Now, that old man also taught me another thing. I really like to deal with a latigo when I'm doing it 35 years later. He also taught me when I go to cinch him up, just take your knee, son, and kick him in the belly as hard as you can so that they let out that air. Well, that's pretty crude horsemanship. Needless to say, I let that go by the wayside a long time ago. You need to make your cinching up process a gradual 2 or 3 step process. Don't just cut them in two at the hitching rail. At best, you'll get horses that get kind of cranky about it and pin their ears back and act like they want to bite you when you're trying to cinch them up. And at worst, there's a phenomenon called cinch bound, where you tighten them up too tight too soon, and it appears like they're just standing there, everything's all right, but then they go to take a step and that cinch binds them, and I've seen them flip over backwards or pull back or fall down to the ground or all kinds of demonstrative things and blow up, and it was all from tightening them up too tight too soon. So I draw that cinch up just snug enough to where that saddle's not going to fall underneath my horse's belly. Then maybe it's a good time to lead them off a little bit, and then draw that cinch up a little bit more. Maybe lunge them around in a couple circles, and then draw it up a little bit more before we get on them. Make it a gradual 2 or 3 step process. Politely cinch up your horse. Your horse will appreciate you for it and just might keep you safer.